The Okavango swamps of Botswana form a wildlife paradise protected primarily by one of man's most lethal pests, the tsetse fly. But now the demand for water in the mining of diamonds and copper poses another threat, as you can see in next week's World About Us at the usual time. Tomorrow at 7:40 on BBC2, Roots of England. This week, Brian Truman journeys to Saddleworth in the Pennines, a collection of 13 villages with a long tradition of weaving.
900 years ago, the Domesday Book described Saddleworth as wasteland. Now it's a collection of 13 villages tucked away in the steep valleys that cut into the Pennines. Villages with names like Dobcross, Diggle, Delph and Uppermill. It's an area where the hill farmers used often to supplement their income from the land by weaving. The first small fulling mills harnessed the power of the streams that ran off the upland slopes. But later, the parish church, once at the centre of things, was left behind on the hill as the steam engine took over from the water wheel and the weaving community at Uppermill moved down into the valley bottom.
Brian Truman talks to mill owners and workers from Saddleworth in Roots of England tomorrow at 7:40 on BBC2. In 15 minutes, more international golf, with the regular pros meeting head-on without their celebrity partners. Now at almost 6 minutes past 8, the news with Richard Baker.
General Zia of Pakistan defends his decision to give in to the hijackers who surrendered last night in Syria. The Pakistani leader says he was left no alternative to releasing more than 50 detainees. General Zia put it this way: a few bad apples in exchange for 100 passengers. General Zia accused Afghanistan of aiding the terrorists, and he said Syria had refused to help a Pakistan rescue attempt at Damascus. In Tripoli, Colonel Gaddafi has explained Libya's sudden decision to refuse asylum to the hijackers and the former detainees. Not enough was known about them, he said, and besides, Libya was no longer a safe haven for all hijackers. The former hostages are in hospital in Syria, still recovering from their ordeal. The terrorists are in custody, their future uncertain. They'd surrendered last night when Syria offered them asylum. This report from Keith Graves.
Like so many of the happenings of the past 2 weeks, the end came as a surprise. As Syrian and Pakistani officials puzzled over their next move, the gunmen gave them 10 minutes warning and then appeared at the rear door of the aircraft, waving their pistols, machine guns and a grenade. Wearing traditional Pakistani dress, they waved to the Syrian security men at the foot of the steps, handed over their weapons, and in return were given flowers by the Syrians. As they were led to cars, they were still defiant.
Yes. Do you have any message? Do you have any message?
Yes, we are fighting for Bhuttoism. Fighting for Bhuttoism. We are humanists.
Then, without explanation, the doors were closed again. But from the cheerful waves of the flight deck crew, it was obvious that for them too the end was near. And sure enough, a few minutes later, the doors opened again, and the passengers started disembarking. Some looked relieved, some were in tears. The only lady passenger had to be helped down the steps, but the rest looked well, bearing in mind that they were leaving the plane 2 weeks after boarding it. There were some emotional welcomes. And the Pathan tribesmen from the remote northwest frontier province actually seemed to be enjoying it all. For the crew, it must have been a special ordeal. They'd watched a Pakistani diplomat as he was shot dead and his body was thrown from the aircraft in Kabul just after the hijack had started. That all seemed a long time ago, and perhaps understandably, in the flood of relief that there had been no more bloodshed, the scenes were joyous ones. The political implications of this incident will have to wait until that joy has abated. Keith Graves, BBC Damascus.
Craig Clymore was one of 3 American hostages. He says the terrorists had threatened to kill them.
What is it like inside?
So like inside, 300 hours of a machine gun at your head. They're willing to blow everybody up with no problem at all. They're getting ready to kill us one at a time. Americans, one every hour. If you had a message, 20 minutes, it would have been... The message came in 20 minutes in time. If it had been any later, one American every hour.
Do you hate them now?
Do I hate them? After reading, well, after I see what they did to somebody, killing somebody directly right in front of me, I don't really like them. I saw somebody shot directly dead in front of me.
Clymore is wanted in California on drugs charges. Ken Barrington, the assistant manager with the England cricketers in the West Indies, has died suddenly in Barbados. The former Surrey and England cricketer, who was 50, had a heart attack in Bridgetown, where the third test is being played. He was one of the country's finest post-war batsmen and played in 82 tests, scoring nearly 7,000 runs. Since retiring after an earlier heart attack 12 years ago, he'd been a test selector and team manager. Michael Blakey reports from Barbados.
Ken Barrington died in his hotel room in Bridgetown, Barbados, late last night. The news stunned the members of the touring party who've had so many problems during the last 2 months. The players learned the news from the manager in the team headquarters. It was agreed that today's play would go ahead.
There'll be hundreds and thousands of cricketers who will feel this loss very sadly. In Australia and India, Pakistan, New Zealand, all the major cricketing countries. And Kenny was putting back into the game far more than he ever took out of it as a player. He was so enthusiastic with our younger cricketers, and I think he saw this difficult tour, and difficult on the field, and difficult to win test matches, as one in which he hoped that as many as possible of our younger cricketers would come back better players. But his boyish enthusiasm, his infectious grin and so on and so forth, kept us all happy, great sense of humour, and the game would be very much the poorer. And
during the tour, Ken Barrington was in charge of the practice sessions in the nets. It was his job to organise the batting and the bowling, and then help to select the team. Today, Jeff Miller took over the job as the England players prepared for the third day of the test match.
We knew that he had some sort of heart failure before, a couple of years ago, somewhere in Australia. But, he looked so vigorous here. He's enjoying every moment of it, and it's a pity that he had to go like that.
10 minutes before the match began, the two sides lined up in front of the pavilion to pay their respects to a man who was admired and respected throughout the world, particularly here in the West Indies, where he toured twice as a player. Michael Blakey, BBC, Barbados.
Tributes to Ken Barrington have come from many cricketers who played with him during his first-class career, including former Yorkshire and England fast bowler Freddie Truman.
Very difficult batsman to get out. Always glad if you got him out. He was one of those type of batsmen that once he got in, you had to dig him out. He gave nothing away and he asked for nothing. As I say, of the highest possible class, and he was also not only a stern man, a man with great powers of concentration when he was batting, he was also a great humorist, a really great humorist.
In the test, Jackman has taken more West Indian wickets. The latest score in the West Indies' second innings, 176 for 4. The Labour Party in Scotland wants the next Labour government to set up a Scottish Assembly which would have the power to make laws and to raise taxes. Delegates at the party's annual conference in Perth approved a resolution on devolution which goes further than any previous pledge on the issue by the Scottish Labour Party. The French film director René Clair has died at his home in Dockers in Liverpool have rejected an offer of a £16,500 golden handshake. The Transport Workers' Union wants the temporary deal, aimed at cutting the Liverpool workforce by 1,500, extended to all British ports. Severance pay is normally £10,500. The French film director René Clair has died at his home in Paris. He was 82. Clair began directing films in 1923 and specialised in comedies with philosophical themes. Among his best-known films were Sous les toits de Paris, made in 1930, Le Million, and The Ghost Goes West, which he made in Hollywood. A second Republican prisoner has started a hunger strike at the Maze prison in Northern Ireland. Francis Hughes, who's 25, refused breakfast this morning, joining another man who's been on hunger strike for 15 days. Finally, an American team of rugby players has been competing against 12 British sides in Loughborough. Their presence wasn't the only unusual feature of the championships. All the players were women. Geoffrey Green reports.
Ladies rugby has been played in America for several years, and these tourists from Santa Monica are proving to be much more experienced and better motivated than the British girls. Their technique is better, and they're stronger kickers of the ball. The girls play to the same rules as men, but each half only lasts for 20 minutes. In this game, the Americans, in the light shorts, overwhelmed their opponents from Imperial College London by 30 points to 0, scoring 7 tries in the process. The similarity with the men's game ended when it came to the beer drinking afterwards. The ladies from Loughborough had forgotten to apply for a licence.
And the Americans overwhelmed the British teams. The final score was Santa Monica 8, Loughborough 0. And that's the news on 2. If you won't be with us later on BBC One, good night.
Here's the weather. After a frost tonight, it will be rather cold and a showery day tomorrow for much of Britain. In western areas, the showers will be scattered with some sunshine in between. For many eastern and central parts of the country, though, there'll be some quite heavy and frequent showers, and these will become more prolonged later. Some snow is also likely, mainly over northern parts, and perhaps in places further south later in the day.